Hi everyone, this is Amar, and we are going to continue the book reading series of Happiness in Your Skin. I'll be reading the other books also, and I'm sorry it's been a long break. In case people have been following that series, the last video was shot in July, and this is November. So August, September, October, 3 months, over 3 months just went by here there. This year has been difficult for a lot of us. It's been difficult for me also, as I won't say this year has not been difficult for me. It's been tough. It's been tough for all of us mentally. It's been tough emotionally. It's been tough psychologically. It's been tough, right? So it's been tough to be happy in your skin. But all of us have dealt with this year in different ways, and I also have been trying to deal with the year in different ways. So, but we'll continue the series, right? Life has to move on, and we'll continue the book series. So this is the next video of the book reading series of Happiness in Your Skin. We were talking last about happiness at work, so I'll continue from there. Let's read happiness at work, and I'll try to complete a certain section before we. So I'm on page number 21 of this book, Happiness in Your Skin. In case you read it, in case you haven't read it, you can still buy from Amazon. It's available. So happiness at work. So I won't. I think we've covered this section. So let's start from here. So work is something that you do for a living. A living means different things for different people. For a beggar, a living means to get up, beg, eat, whatever the arms can buy, and go back to sleep. At the railway station, under the flyover, anywhere under the dark sky of the night. For us, people like you and me, living means being able to afford a good life. Now, what is a good life? Now, that's where we may have a debate. For most people, a good life would mean a house, a car, a family, or being able to support the family. Most people don't quite understand the spiritual aspect of the word. There is a spiritual aspect of your work. Your work either energizes your spirit or it kills your spirit. A lot of people make a lot of money doing things they hate, and it's not difficult. This is interesting because a lot of people do make a lot of money doing things they hate. They don't feel an emotional connection with their work, and they do make money because in case you apply yourself at anything in life, for example, even if you apply yourself, let's say you don't like kabaddi for that matter, right, and you apply yourself at kabaddi for a bunch of period of time, you will improve it. You will improve it anything you apply yourself on, because we can think as human beings, and if we apply ourselves on anything, we'll eventually improve. Slowly we will improve, right? So it's not really difficult to make money at things you hate also, because eventually you're going to improve, but you have no emotional connection with your work, right? We can be good at what we hate. For example, the country India is full of engineers from top engineering school who did not wish to be engineers. I'm not an engineer, but I know many who are, and they're not pursuing engineering. Many of my engineering friends are now copywriters, content writers, filmmakers, and stand up comedians. They studied engineering. They did well at it in spite of the knowledge that they did not like it. They did it to please someone, the parents, the peers, whoever else, but not themselves. Have you ever considered why so many people do things they hate? Let me repeat this question. Have you ever considered why so many people do things they hate? Let's not say hate, stuff they don't like. Like a lot of people in the world do stuff they don't like because we haven't really taken the time to think what we really like. If we take the time to think what we really like, we will do what we like, right? Because it's simple. As kids, we did what we liked. We did what we liked till somebody told us you can't do what you like. Start growing up, start becoming an adult. And becoming an adult actually meant to do things we didn't like. You have to learn to do this, you have to learn to do that, you have to do things. Have to is the biggest pain, one of the most painful uh, phrases in English. It's not a phrase. I've forgotten. I need to get my grammar right, but it is right. But I don't know what do you call this. Have to. Have to is the worst possible connector in English, because it makes your life painful. Every time you're using have to, that means you're using your life, making your life painful. So people have to do stuff because by the time they are adults, they have never taken the time to figure themselves out. They've never taken the time to ask themselves what do they really like, what do they really care about, and as a consequence, they are forced to do stuff that they don't like because they don't know what do they like. Why do so many people do stuff that they don't like day after day, year after year? It's because they don't think they will be allowed to do what they want. They don't think they will be allowed to do what they want as well, because that's how the society works. People tell you that you can't just do what you like. Why don't you think so? It's because the society is structured on sadness and sadism. Unfortunately, people don't believe that they can do stuff they enjoy and make money off it. The rest of the society isn't quite supportive either, and hence people who are fighting for their happiness are looked upon as rebels. It's sad, right? That people who are fighting for their happiness are looked down upon as rebels. We don't want to be rebels. Like people who are fighting to for their happiness because they want to do what they like, they want to do what they love. They are labeled as rebels. They don't want to be rebels. We don't want to be rebels. Like we want to be normal people. Like people, we shouldn't, like nobody wants to be labeled as rebels. It's unfortunate that they have to be labeled as rebels just because they are fighting for their own happiness, while the rest of the society is compromised with unhappiness. This is stupid, no? Why should we look down upon people who are chasing their happiness as abnormal? Why should we not look at them as normal, righteous people? It's almost like I'm talking and that's what I put down in the book. Like that's what I explain, and the next sentence is exactly what I'm saying. So this book is largely me talking. Our work time forms the majority of our lives, and each minute we spend there should be spent carefully and meaningfully. Jobs should be designed keeping a certain person in mind. The traits for the job should be behavioral instead of competence based. Competence can be taught, not character. I've said this like multiple times. Competence can be taught, not character. Character cannot be taught. Like you can't, if you get someone who's great at their job but he sucks the life of his colleagues, that's not a great colleague to have, because he'll suck the life of the rest of the team, and he'll be counterproductive for the team no matter how competent that person is. So competence can be taught, not character. Jobs should be designed keeping the character in mind. Happiness at work is not just about recreation rooms, pool table and table tennis rooms. It's also about the time at the desk in front of the computer. Let me give you an analogy. If you look at Microsoft Office software, okay, this is an interesting analogy, and this is let's do this. Let's actually do this. So, jobs should be designed in terms of keeping the character in mind. Happiness at work is not just about recreation rooms, pool table, and table tennis. It's also about the time at the desk. It's in front of the computer. Let me give you an analogy. If you look at Microsoft Office software, different people can be clubbed on the basis of these itself. So different people in any office, for that matter, can be clubbed on the basis of Microsoft Office software, like Microsoft Office software, right? So the features, the tools that we use. So the Microsoft Office tools. So there are the Excel people. There are the Excel people. The Excel people are good at mathematical jugglery. They like to play with pivot tables, coefficient charts, and all the stuff that Excel generates. They don't like people talking shit, and in their minds, everybody who doesn't talk in numbers is talking shit. They want succinct information on the basis of which they can take decisions. They do not usually question things, why things are the way they are, but they just would do things or accept things on face value because Microsoft Excel says so. So these are the Excel people. These are the numbers people. They like numbers, and they don't want to necessarily question the logic behind numbers, but they just like numbers. They like coefficient charts. They like pivot tables. They like all the stuff that Excel generates, and they kind of get an orgasm out of Microsoft Excel, right? The other side of people are the Word people. These are the guys who like working on Microsoft Word. They like blank sheets of paper. They like to fill them with their thoughts. They like depth. They like detail, and they want to know now. They want to know why. A lot of these people are copywriters in ad agencies, document writers, script writers, thought leaders, strategic thinkers. The Word document people may be a little slow, but their work involves deep thinking, an output which is subject to careful consideration. So largely the Word document people are thinkers and writers. They like to think, they like to strategize, and they like to write, right? So they're people who like to think and write. They are the Word people. Copywriters, people who write documents in offices, they are the Word people. Then there are the PowerPoint people. Since you can use PowerPoint to show numerical data and quantitative analysis both, people who are really good at this software have a penchant for both numbers and quantitative analysis. So they are good at both numbers or even quantitative analysis. I would insist, however, these people are rare. You would find the Word people filling slides with words, and you would find the Excel people filling slides with bar graphs and pie charts. Right? And the fourth set of people are the outlook people. Then there are people who don't, so they're the people, this is the fourth set of people, right? The people who don't like to do any work, any of that. They don't like Word documents or Excel sheets. They don't like the jazz or PowerPoint either. These guys are the bosses. They're the outlook. Right, and the fourth set of people are the outlook people. They are people who don't like to do any work, any of that. They don't like Word documents or Excel sheets. They don't like the jazz or PowerPoint either. These guys are the bosses. They are outlook people. They go for a smoke. They come back. They send a few emails, and then they go for a smoke. They like to just play mail the entire day. Sometimes they would send good emails. Sometimes they would send stinkers, but they are quite good at sending emails. They are the outlook people. So they're usually the four kinds of people in any usual workplace. Let me warn you, the Excel people tend to be introverts since they do not like to mingle with people much. They hate excessive talk. They would rather come do their work and leave. On the other side, the Word people are extroverts since they own the words. They know how to express their thoughts and like sharing with others. The Outlook and the PowerPoint people could be either or the Word or the Excel guys. So when you're designing jobs for roles in your organization, you should consider who this man or woman would be and how they would like to spend their time. If jobs are designed keeping in mind the kind of person who is expected to fill the job, there's a high likelihood the people who fill those roles will enjoy their work and be more fulfilled, right? Happy people perform better. Happy people perform better. All right, so this sounds like an obvious statement. I do not know why no one studies to understand this. Imagine the opposite of this statement. Do miserable people perform better? Miserable people apply for misery everywhere. They apply the misery everywhere and they work in no exception. I've worked in 5 to 6 companies over the course of my corporate career, and I always felt people perform better when they're doing something that it comes naturally to them. It sounds so simple, but it's so difficult to apply. I hated Excel. So you can see I'm a word guy. I like words. I like to write them as well as speak. In one of my jobs, I spent a lot of time making tables on Microsoft Excel, and I hated it. I hated running those pivot tables and this chart and that chart, and I hated it. My boss at that point was an old Singaporean chap who used to insist everybody learn Excel. I tried, but it was a struggle, and for good reasons. I guess that job didn't last me long. Also, that man died a painful death on a pivot table. If you're a boss feeding, then you manage a bunch of people. Try to steer them towards responsibility which they're naturally good at. If you're a boss and you're leading people, try to get people to do stuff they're good at. Distribute responsibilities accordingly. If they're happy, your team would perform better, and you would be happier. If you do that, your team members would love you, and would want to work with you over and over. You would grow within the organization, have the reputation of a man who's loved by his team, or a woman for that matter. Bosses have a bad reputation, unfortunately. That's because they're not thinking in the interest of the team. If you think in the interest of your team, they'll think in your interest. Each member of your team could be an asset for you and stand in front of targets and deadlines that you face. You need to nurture your team and see them do miracles for you. That's where we'll stop. We do have more on work-related happiness, but we will continue that on the next video. Alright, thanks for watching. Stay tuned to the channel. Please subscribe to it in case you like it. I'm going to put a bunch of content which is inspiring and inspirational and or related to happiness. I'm also writing a blog these days on happiness. Hopefully at some point I'll start making videos around that also, but right now we'll focus on a thought of the day and reading my book on happiness. If something comes across my mind which I think is important to tell you, I will tell you that also. This is my channel where I talk about life and books and work, and if that interests you, please subscribe. Alright, thank you so much. Bye.